88 million years ago, India was not here. Instead, it was all the way over there. And then randomly one day, it decided to go for a swim and hit China really hard. And that's how Himalayas were made. Why are you telling me a story from the dinosaur age? When did this turn into the paleontology nerd? Well, my lad, that's because geography is destiny. What this event created was a tropical paradise that was warm because of its latitude and cool because of its proximity to the Himalayas. And there was a literal ice wall that isolated it enough from the rest of the world that no one could just suddenly waltz in. And it created its own kind of flora and fauna that allowed for spices that can never grow anywhere else other than India to grow in India. This was very attractive to humans across the time periods. And at the same time, it created this kind of isolation that made sure that no outside empire was able to conquer India without becoming Indian itself. Well, except the British and the Persians, but we don't talk about those. 40,000 years ago, some humans encountered India. They became the first humans to enter India. And the only thing we ever find of them are bones and stone tools. And that's what continued to happen until 8,000 or more years ago, when a bunch of farmers from Zagros mountains of Iran migrated into India and settled the Indus Valley. And they started building small farming settlements over time. And by the time of around 3500 BC or 5500 years ago, these small settlements started growing into small towns and cities. And these towns and cities spread all throughout northwestern India. Is that the Indus Valley civilization with their excellent drainage system? We don't have a lot of information about this time period. They didn't trade a lot with the rest of the world, and we don't have any writing left behind from this time. But we do know that they buried their dead in a very similar way to how later Harappan civilizations did, and their genetics are very similar. So we call them early Harappan phase. Sometime around 2800 BC or 4800 years ago, majority of the cities from this time period burned down. This forced people to move elsewhere and build up new cities, and these new cities would be bigger than ever before. This kicked in the mature Harappan phase. For 700 years from that point on, cities in Indus Valley were some of the largest and the most advanced in the entire world. In fact, Indus Valley was the largest contiguous Bronze Age kingdom, and it wouldn't be outcompeted for size until Achaemenid Persian Empire started conquering 1,000 years after the fall of Indus Valley. Now is when big cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-daro were built, with city planning and drainage systems that eclipse even modern day Indian cities. Their trade was widespread across the world, and to at least Mesopotamia, they were known as Meluhans. In fact, there have even been written documentations of Meluhans coming in and taking part in wars that happened in Mesopotamia. In between 2100 to 1900 BC, one of the major rivers of this civilization, or the Saraswati River, dried up. This caused the Indus Valley civilization to fracture into multiple smaller ones, and multiple newer ones with no real affiliations to Indus Valley civilization popped up as well. The most interesting of which is the ochre pottery culture, a culture in which we have found swords and shields and even a freaking chariot. They disposed of their dead in two different ways, both in the way of the burying like the Indus Valley civilization, and burning their dead like the Hindu Vedic civilization that came later. A similar case happened with the cemetery etch culture, or the northern half of the Indus Valley civilization. Jolkal culture was the one that popped up around Mohenjo-daro, and it lost most of its luster. It was at best a shell of its former self. The Rangpur culture centered around Gujarat, and it was the one civilization that didn't have any influence of the Aryans until 1100 BC or 800 years after the other civilizations started showing signs of their arrival. There are even evidences of some of its Harappan sites surviving all the way until 1000 BC and even later. Anyway, some pastoralist tribe from Central Asia came to India. These people are called Aryans and probably brought a significant chunk of Sanskrit and Hindu Vedic culture. But not all of it. The estimate of their arrival ranges from all the way back in 2200 BC all the way till 1000 BC. But according to linguistic analysis, Rig Veda was written around 1500 BC, which is the central text of the Vedic culture. And since they talk a lot about Indian features, they probably came in before that. Most of the late Harappan sites are a mix of Indus Valley and Vedic culture, except the sites of the Rangpur culture. By around 1400 to 1300 BC, most of Indus Valley civilization sites got replaced by what we call the grey ware culture, or what we speculate to be the Vedic cities. When did this transition begin? What did it entail? Did it even have a genocide? We don't know. What we do know is that sometime during this transition, a great battle of 10 kings took place, where kings from different Indian cultures came together to fight one king from the Bharat dynasty. And you know what? The king from the Bharat dynasty won alone. And then the Bharat dynasty came together with the Puru dynasty and created the Kuru kingdom, or Kurukshetra, which for the next 1000 years was one of the most significant kingdoms of India. After his victory, the Bharat king sent across scholars across northern India to compile all the different kinds of beliefs found in these lands. This compilation of hymns and beliefs is called the Rig Veda. We don't know at what phase of transition in between Indus Valley to Vedic culture did the Rig Veda get compiled in, but we do know that there is influence from both the cultures present in it. For example, the reverence towards the Saraswati river seems to come from the Indus Valley civilization, half of which's cities were built along the banks of this now dead river. And by the time Aryans gained any significant foothold in the Indian subcontinent, the river had dried out. Another speculation is that Puranic gods such as Vishnu, Shiva, and Devi come from Indus Valley, while the Vedic gods such as Indra come from the Aryans. But again, that's just speculation. Anyway, we lacked any source of history for a long time from this point on. We know through archaeological evidence that cities were growing in size to even rival the Indus Valley cities by 500 BC. And we believe that Buddha and Mahavir, the founder of Jainism, were born somewhere around this time. And we know that Magad, the kingdom in Bihar, was one of the most advanced of its time in metallurgy and other technology, which caused it to become one of the first empires of India. That's kind of all we know. It was either because Indians were just above writing and didn't think it worth their time, or they did write, but they wrote on stuff that didn't last more than 50 years. We do have some references to older texts in North India, but none of these texts survive. That was until Alexander of Macedon arrived to India. He fought this local king called Porus, and he defeated him. But he was injured, and the battle weakened his army, to the point that his soldiers decided that they were homesick and decided to return back to Greece. But he did leave some Greek nerds behind that did write things down. And what they wrote first was that 6 years after the return of Alexander, a general from the Nanda Empire attacked them and married the daughter of the general and left. This general, his name was Chandragupta Maurya, the founder of the Mauryan Empire. When he returned to Patliputra, which is modern day Patna, and the capital of the Magad Empire, he overthrew the current ruling dynasty and became the ruler of a newer dynasty. How did he overthrow them? I don't know. What we do know though is how his reign went. It was literal sunshines and rainbows, according to a very biased source that may or may not have existed. And then his son Bindusara may or may not have conquered Deccan all the way down to Tamil kingdoms. Wait, when did the Deccan get civilized? It's very muddy when this happened. Chandragupta's grandson, or Ashoka, was a violent despot that started a insane and violent conquest of Kalinga, which is modern day Orissa. The conquest was so violent that he decided that, conquest is overrated, and he gave up on all conquest since. But he never left his violent ways, as he continued to persecute Jains and nearly wiped out another dharmic religion called the Ajivikas, all in order to spread Buddhism. And he reigned over the largest empire in Indian history. No biggie. Again, with the exception of the British. Ashoka erected 15 edicts, stuff written on stone in Magadhi Prakrit, the language of the times. They highlight the life and times of Ashoka and his story, and they are the first surviving translated piece of text that has survived from Indian history. Unless again you're talking about the Vedas or the biased source that talked about his grandfather that may or may not have existed. These edicts were not written in Devanagari, the script we use to write Hindi and Sanskrit these days. Instead, they were written in this script called Brahmi. This script predates Devanagari by 1,000 years at least, and it is believed to have been inspired by Aramaic. And a lot of people believe that this is the first time anyone wrote anything down in India, which is a very disprovable belief, because at this time, if Ashoka wanted to borrow a writing system, Greek was literally right there. Alexander left behind a lot of Greeks that were very common in his court, and so he could have just borrowed their writing system if he wanted to create a new one. No, this writing system probably existed for a while before, and it was probably something that the local people understood. Even though Ashoka's edicts are the earliest deciphered piece of writing we have, it is clear that there was writing long before his coming. What the hell happened then? We don't know. Meanwhile, around the time of the Nanda dynasty, the precursor dynasty to the Mauryan Empire, the Tamil kings came to power. There were three major kingdoms at this time, alongside many smaller ones called the Cholas, Cheras, and the Pandyas. They worked kind of like the Vikings, where they raided their neighbors to raise money. That and their spice trade with Rome and Greece was their only source of revenue. Living there was pretty cool, with some major catches. Like what? Like there are no income taxes, but the neighboring kingdom would probably end up raiding you. That's just like the Vikings. The caste system was fast and loose, in which you could much more easily move up and down in your caste, but the lowest castes were treated worse than North India. That's just capitalism. Women were allowed to choose their profession, and love marriages were common, but they were burnt alive with the body of their dead husband the moment he died. And their husband probably died in an attack from a neighboring kingdom. They probably had their own religion at some point in history. But by the time we have any decipherable language from them, they had incorporated the Vedic customs by that point, possibly more fervently than their northern counterparts. The only time we have any inscriptions from South India in the ancient age of India is from 300 BC to 300 AD. A group of the best scholars from this time came together in 3 different meetings to compile all the Tamil literature. They were called Sangams, which is why this period is called the Sangam age. of Tamil. In 300 AD, they will get taken over by Kalabra dynasty, who didn't write much down, so we don't know what they were doing during this time. But eventually, around 600 AD, they would all come back. Meanwhile, a lot happened in this time period in North India. Ashoka's descendants were not able to hold on to all of his territories, and they lost it within a couple of lifetimes. First, Kalinga broke free, and then the Deccan, and then the western half of India. And the rest of the empire would have fallen apart too had it not been for Pushyamitra Shunga, the founder of the next dynasty. He brought the Vedic traditions back, and he brought it back with a new flair. Some sources say that he captured and killed a lot of Buddhists. Jury is out on that one. In Western India, the Greeks had gained power and created the Indo-Greek kingdoms, and at some point they had become Buddhists, and they were the ones who gave Buddha a face. Before them, Buddhists used to pray to Buddha through building stupas, and after them they started having statues in monasteries. One of their major kings, Benender I, saw that the Shunga dynasty was persecuting Buddhists, so he started attacking them, and he attacked all the way into the empire until Patliputra. But he was unable to hold on to this land because he had to return back to his homeland to defend it from invading Scythians. But despite him not conquering anything, this caused the Shunga dynasty to go down in a tailspin. There was another kingdom in the Deccan Plateau that was watching all of this chaos go down and decided that this was the perfect chance to start conquering. They were the Satvahana Empire. They spanned the entire Deccan Plateau and built the first half of the Ajanta caves. They traded heavily with the Romans to the point that their ruins have the most Roman coins found to this day. The people that came after them called them the Andhras, or the ancestors to the Telugu people, even though they spoke a Sanskrit derived language. Weird. It was not even remotely the weirdest empire of this time. You see, there were these Central Asian people that terrorized the whole world, and at some point decided to move south into India. It was the Scythians who rode into India and yoinked all of the land from the Indo-Greek kingdom. As the empires from Magad wore down, a new rivalry took over, that of Satvahanas and Indo-Scythians. Except the Scythians don't hold on to their northern half of their land for too long. There was a slightly Aryan population living in Western China called the Yuezhi people. They were forced out by the Chinese emperor to move further south into Bactria, where there were the Greco-Bactrian kingdoms that they took over. The Greeks were there too. These people divided into 5 different kingdoms. The southernmost of them were called Kushans. Cushions as in pillows. These pillows united all the 5 different tribes of the Yuezhi Confederacy and moved across Hindu Kush into India. They first conquered the Gandhara region in India, and then they went on to conquer the whole area where the Indo-Scythians remained, pushing them southwards to Gujarat, where they became Western Kshatrabs. It was the Western Kshatrab that the Satvahana Empire fought with regularly and traded land with, and also intermarried each other. It was very weird and European-esque. But somehow the Kushans were even weirder. This was them at their peak. Does it have parts of China and Iran in its empire? Yup. And for culture, if you gave them a religion form that identifies the religion of a person, they would create a new box, a new category that says all of the above and then tick it. This weird soup of a 3-way battle royale would continue until the Satvahana Empire would fall apart into multiple smaller kingdoms, and the Kushans would lose their western lands to a rising new dynasty in the Persian Empire called the Sassanids, and their northern lands to incompetence, leaving them only the Ganga region and parts of southern Punjab. You might think this was the perfect time for Scythians or Kushans to take over all of India because Satvahana Empire had fallen apart. But there was a little known detail called the 4th century, where literally everyone had a bad time. So they couldn't conquer more than what they had. Everyone except the Huns, apparently, who were another Central Asian tribe that went around the whole world and attacked Rome and China and Persia and even India. Them and the Gupta Empire in the northern India and the Vataka Empire in central Deccan Plateau. When the whole world was in darkness and the Western Roman Empire was starting to fall apart, China was falling to 100 pieces and the rest of the world was being attacked by the Huns. Northern India would hit its golden age under these two empires. We will explore that in another video, since that is the classical age of India and this is the ancient age of India. And this video is getting too long anyway. See you next time.